Nice. Hey there, how's it going? Welcome back to the Let's Play world, and welcome back to another episode of the Westfall project. For the last 4 episodes, I've been gradually expanding this area into a gigantic custom biome, all based around Westfall from World of Warcraft. But why did I start this project in the first place? Well, if you're asking that question, then you clearly haven't watched the other episodes, and that's a shame, because you really owe it to yourself to watch some quality content. Hey, I'm not gonna judge though. If you want a TLDR, I'll give you a TLDR. This is the Bedrock Project. It's a 400 by 400 block area dug out underneath my main base where I've exposed all 16 quad beacons that I set up at Bedrock. My sole objective for the past year has been to finish this project, and the big thing I've got left to do is completely cover the entire floor with black stained glass. But there's a problem. You see, I've got all these chests filled to the brim with stone from the excavation of this area, and no good place to put them. On top of that, I've got all these chests over here from the excavation for my kelp farm, and I've got these chests too from the excavation for my super smelter, and I've got all these chests of bulk that I've been storing at my base for years. Never really used any of them. Needless to say, I've got a raging case of excess stone syndrome. Luckily, there are a ton of antidotes that I can choose from to cure such an ailment, and I think I've chosen the one that's the most fun. This is a Mason Villager trading hall, and it's what started the Westfall project in the first place. There are 96 Mason villagers, humanely stacked together in this building, and each of them has the trade where, you guessed it, I can convert stone into emeralds. But this setup goes further than just that, because I've also got this building over here that's actually a bulk storage silo with a capacity of 110 double chests. That system is connected to the trading hall underground, and it'll automatically send the stone over as I'm trading, allowing me to maximize my time converting stone into juicy emeralds. Now, this is a rough estimate, but once I've traded all my stone away, I should be looking at least 50,000 emeralds. See, I told you this is gonna be fun. But I'm not quite done explaining myself here, because remember, this is an episode of the Westfall project, and this trading setup only happened in part 1. In part 2, I built a 100% custom mountain range from the ground up, and in part 3, I built a donkey breeding ranch on top of it. This ranch allows me to efficiently breed, speed test, and dispose of donkeys, all with the hope of eventually getting one that's super fast. The reason I did this is because, well, I'll need a way to transport my stone reserves over to the bulk storage silo, and though it's admittedly faster to just fly with Elytra, I thought it'd be way more interesting to do it with donkeys. More on that in a minute. The last thing I've done was in the previous episode, part 4, and there I built this entire town that surrounds my trading hall, which by the way is actually a recreation of Moonbrook, a town that you'll find in Westfall. So after many, many months, numerous episodes, and hundreds of hours of work, we've at last arrived at part 5 here, where I will finally be trading away my stone reserves so I can get back to the Bedrock project. But if you know me well enough at this point, you'll know this is not going to be so straightforward. Transporting my stone reserves on a donkey means that I'm going to have to journey across this underdeveloped land to and from the Bedrock project. And on top of just looks, there's also the issue of actually, getting there. Currently, the only access point I've got is through this secret entrance in the lava. Yeah. And then it goes all the way down to the bottom. I don't think I need to tell you why this wouldn't work.
No.
So instead, here's my idea. I want to build a staircase that goes from the edge of the Bedrock project all the way up to the surface here, where I can then develop a road that connects it with Moonbrook. I want the staircase to be a smooth ride, so it's going to be sloped gradually with 2 solid blocks, 2 slabs, 2 solid blocks, and so on. Doing that should bring me all the way over and pop out somewhere here in this pond over 200 blocks away. I want this path to be 4 blocks wide with a block on either side for decorations, so this is going to be 6 blocks wide by 225 all the way down to Bedrock. But I can't very well build this thing without first getting this area dug out, so let's get to it. Hey, I'm done now. Let's check it out. So this brings us into the southwestern corner of the bedrock project, and I positioned it to be in between these two beacons. I made sure that the placement was exactly in the middle because of course the symmetry overlords commanded it. It's 45 blocks from the edge of that beacon and 45 blocks from the edge of the other one. Another thing worth mentioning is that this slice goes right through part of my kelp farm. I dug around it, of course. I'm not masochistic enough to demolish it. The point is, it's in the way, and I knew that this was going to be an issue, but I went ahead with the excavation anyways because I think I have a way of making it work. More on that later. Anyways, the next step here before I start building the staircase is I want to clean up these exposed walls of rock. A lot of this surface area is going to be visible in the final design, and I want to make sure it fits with the material palette. I want the bedrock project to have a very monochrome material palette: black floors, white iron blocks, and gray walls. This means removing all of the unacceptable blocks like diorite, granite, dirt, gravel, and all the different types of ore. I want this tunnel to be an extension of the bedrock project, and thus it's got to play by the same rules. So my next task here is to scaffold around the walls and replace these patches of bad material with andesite. When I'm done, it should look like a big stone wall with a bunch of andesite splotches. Alright, so I'm about halfway through the process here, and I've got to show you how I've been doing this because it's just been really fun. As you might know, I've got a rapid click macro set up on my mouse. It spam clicks at about 12 times per second for both left click and right click. I recommend that everyone sets up one of these because they've got a lot of useful applications in survival. For instance, I've been using it to rapidly plant seeds in my underground crop farm, and I've been using it to quickly spread pathway blocks for the Westfall terrain. Well, today we can add another thing to that list because I realized that I can do this. Yeah, so I can spam the scaffolding to the top in a matter of seconds. Then what I've been doing is I'll make my way up, and every time I need to reach something, I'll just branch out 5 or 6 blocks to dig it out. And when I'm done with the whole column, since the scaffolding is all connected, all I have to do is give it a quick little punch. I love scaffolding. And there we go. It feels way more clean this way with just the andesite and stone, and I'm very glad that I decided to do that. Now it's time to build a staircase. In keeping with the monochrome theme, I'm thinking that the obvious material choices are going to be Blackstone and basalt. Blackstone will fit perfectly as the staircase material since it's got some fantastic slab options, and polished basalt has some verticality in its texture, making it an excellent option for support pillars that'll go against both walls. Now, my current supply of Blackstone and basalt is, shall we say, dwindling? So how about I use this as an opportunity to stock up a little bit? Let's explore our options here. If I wanted to farm these blocks, then I'd set up a bartering farm and a basalt generator. But I don't know. Farms are for people who have better things to do. Let's do some manual gathering instead. And we've got a few different locations in the Nether that we can choose from. Think of the most obvious place where we can find both basalt and Blackstone. I know, it might stump you for a second, but trust me, you'll get it. All right, we'll say it on 3. 1, 2, 3. Bastion, yes. This thing is, or should I say was, the Bastion that I died in last episode during my adventure to find a snout pattern. It's funny how the game can throw you all kinds of dangers, piglins, hoglins, and yet at the end of the day, the biggest danger is your own capacity for stupidity. You know, I really disappoint myself sometimes. Oh, I'm dead. That's all my stuff right there. Wow. I wanted revenge, so in an effort to make content, to find closure, I made the farcical decision to spend the last 4 hours leveling this bastion to the ground. It was honestly really fun, and I got a pretty sweet haul of materials out of it. All of these chests here are filled with Blackstone, and I've got some specialty blocks here, and I personally find that 2.5 stacks of gilded Blackstone is very sexy, so I'm happy about that. The other thing was I actually missed a bit of loot around the area. Apparently there was a bunch of gold blocks buried in the structure that I didn't know about, so pro tip, make sure to check beneath the chiseled blocks on the floor, you may find a secret stash. Here's the thing I'm worried about though. This is all the basalt I got. I figured I would have gotten a lot more out of it, but I guess this is it, and I'm worried that it's not going to be enough for all the pillars I'm going to be building. We'll just have to see. At least I know I'll have plenty of Blackstone. This might have been overkill. Okay, so I've gone ahead and crafted up all the different Blackstone variants. There's regular, polished, bricks, and cracked bricks, and besides the latter, there are also slab versions for each of these types, meaning I've got a great variety of textures to choose from when building the staircase. Again, the slope is going to be 2 full blocks, 2 slabs, 2 full blocks, and so on. Also, for the sake of making it feel more solid, I'm doubling up the slabs. It's coming along nicely. I think the texturing worked out well, and as you can see, it goes all the way to the top. For the moment, it's just gonna look like this. I've got some cool plans for how I'm gonna do the whole exit. More on that later, but in the meantime, there's more work to do. An important part of any build is the mob proofing, and so I went ahead and put in lanterns underneath the staircase, 2 on each side, spaced out every 4 blocks. These lanterns shine just enough light up through the gaps on each side, making every block at least a light level of 8 or higher. Nothing's gonna be spawning up here, but I'm only half done because I also want to mob-proof the floor down below. Let me remind you that I want the staircase to feel like an extension of the bedrock project. Thus, I'd like to continue the black stained glass theme, where I replace all the material in between the bedrock and then cover it with a final layer of glass that, if you didn't know, is a non-spawnable block. This, incidentally, is where I got the idea to do the glass in the first place, because despite lighting up the whole area down here, light does not prevent slimes from spawning in their respective slime chunks. And so, by covering it up with a non-spawnable block like glass, it ensures that slimes won't spawn. And because I'm burdened with the unwavering sense to do things the right way, I have to fill in the extra material below to make sure it's properly done. Thus, the bedrock project was born. Anyways, same drill over here. I'll start by digging out all this extra material, get into all the nooks and crannies, filling it with black stained glass, and put down a finished sheet at the top to prevent slime spawns. Now repeat that all the way to the other end. By the way, this is another great use of the rapid click macro. Once I've got the last 2 layers left, I can just run around and hold the macro down. It's very satisfying. Cool. Everything is mob-proof now, from the slight exception of a few areas on the staircase. Remember, slimes can spawn regardless of light level, and there are a few slime chunks that intersect with the staircase below Y40 where they can start spawning. So once again, I can call upon my friend MiniHUD to show me where all these spots are. And I think I'll just use Blackstone pressure plates to take care of this one. Okay, now we are completely mob-proofed. Time to move on to the pillars. And like I said earlier, I'm a little worried that I won't have enough basalt. These pillars are gonna be spaced out every 4 blocks and run all the way from bedrock up to the surface. I'm not gonna do the math on that, but it seems like a lot more than just one shulker box. Only one way to find out, I suppose. This is some extra attention to detail, but I thought it'd be nice to embed the pillars into the bedrock, which means cutting into the glass and extending the basalt into any air gaps that are available. I think this really goes a long way in making them look more solid, otherwise it would just look cheap with them floating atop the glass. Okay, so I'm about halfway through here, and an idea I have. These are some temporary beacons I'd set up earlier during the excavation of this staircase, and I'm not really using haste anymore, but I think jump boost might be really useful. In theory, I'm thinking my rapid click macro combined with jump boost 2 should allow me to double my pillar placing speed. All right, moment of truth, and yep, that works awesome. Now I'm flying. And I'm out of basalt. I know I could have just made a basalt generator, but I thought it'd be way more fun to head over to a basalt delta and instant mine a little quarry. Didn't take long, and besides, why spend my time safely farming basalt when I can take unnecessary risks instead? So again, as long as you know how to deal with the lava, you're actually safer once they hit you. Well, at least I got plenty of basalt now. Let's get back to it. And done. Now, this isn't looking like the most intricate design, but I figured that since I'll be zooming up and down these stairs on a donkey, it's better to keep things simple. Besides that though, we're just about done with this thing. Let's address the elephant in the room though. I'm sure somebody watching has asked the question by now, why would I bother decorating all this extra space underneath the staircase? Am I gonna be using this space? Surely I have a good reason for it, right? In all honesty, yes, most of this isn't ever gonna get seen from above, but that's okay. When I designed this staircase, I wanted to include these gaps along the edges because I felt it looked more interesting versus just extending the floor over or something like that. And because I decided to do this, and because I'm burdened with the unwavering sense to do things the right way, I wanted to put in the extra effort to develop the area down there. Again, I'm probably never gonna stop and look down the cracks to check it out, but that doesn't mean it was a waste of time. Besides the fact that I simply had fun doing it, there's always the possibility that I do take a look, and if I do, then all that work will be down here waiting for me. Roof time. Finally, the last piece of the puzzle is to build a roof over top the area so that the staircase down below can transform into a dark and spacious cavern, a spitting image of the Bedrock Project. Look at this. Like all these other elements, I chose to make the roof simple, and I think that was the right choice because altogether, I think any additional detail would be a bit much. This is just right. Let me use a night vision potion so you can see things better. I used a mixture of both smooth and regular sandstone for the texturing. In case you didn't know, the bottom textures are different for those blocks. And the other thing I did was slope it up by a half slab every 6 pillars, just to prevent it from looking flat. Where things get interesting is with my kelp farm, because again, I didn't want to tear it down or anything, but it needed to be addressed. And ultimately my solution was just to be honest. Instead of trying to cover it up, I just left the gradient wall exposed, and if I happen to go up and remove some of the blocks, you'll find that the farm is right here on the other side. I thought it'd be cool to acknowledge it instead of just covering it up and pretending it isn't there. And I'm glad that I did that because it gave me the idea to make the roof out of sandstone to continue the gradient. And by that same token, I extended the granite end into the lower roof down here. I wanted to make sure this one was as far up as it could go, so it's just kissing the bottom of the farm. And like before, I sloped it mildly and textured it with polished and regular granite. I think this ended up working out better overall because these two materials complement their respective spaces. The light sandstone draws your eyes up to the ceiling and makes the room feel more spacious, whilst the dark granite constricts your view and makes the smaller space feel smaller. It's a little easier to see when the night vision wears off. There we go. Dark granite room over here and light sandstone room over here. I'm very eager to get a donkey in here and give it a good old zoom test, but we're still a bit far off from that point. While the staircase is done, there's still a handsome pile of work waiting for me on the surface. Alright, so I've gone ahead and covered up the staircase and done a general sweep of the area, removing ponds, clearing foliage, and lightly smoothing the terrain so I have a nice clean surface to work upon. And I think now's about the time I lay my cards on the table and give you guys the big plan for today's episode. This, as you know, is Moonbrook. And just a stone's throw away, this is Alexton Farmstead, which I'd like to recreate in my world to conceal my staircase to the Bedrock Project. I'll talk about the other elements in just a minute, but for right now, we're just gonna focus on the barn. What I'd like to do is design this bad boy with a redstone doorway inside that's completely flush and hidden, but when activated will reveal a secret passageway that connects right into my staircase. Now, a contraption of that complexity is a bit out of my wheelhouse, so I deferred to the wonderful community of door builders out there. And what I love in particular about this type of redstone is it's very dynamic. There are all sorts of different ways to build redstone doors. You might be focused on speed, compactability, maybe a cool animation, or how about all three? There's essentially a limitless number of door designs, and thus finding one is a lot more interesting compared to, say, a mob farm, which can have more limited options. All of this is to say that I found a design after a bit of looking, and I love it. It's fast, it's clever, it's exactly what I was looking for, so please send your love over to Ira for this awesome 2-wide seamless staircase design. Just look at this animation. That's gonna look sick when it's all built into the barn. Which reminds me, I gotta make that. The cool thing about this barn is, like a lot of assets in video games, it's something that gets reused a lot. Though it's been retextured and modified, the base model is essentially identical to the barn that I've already designed from Moonbrook. So all I had to do was copy my version over, remove the silo, and redesign and retexture the base building into the new version that I'll be building today. This isn't the final design, there's no interior, but I wanted to show off something that I think is pretty cool. These jack-o'-lanterns in here have been strategically placed near the windows, 1, 2, and 3, and the reason they're far away is so that some of the light can bleed through and give a more moody, dim vibe from the outside. Time set midnight, and look at that. It gives the indication that there's something going on in there, but not much. The same effect is visible on the other side, and I got the idea to do this because that's how it is in game. I really like this building. It's fairly simple, but it's also got a unique vibe to it. I think that's why I love building things from WoW so much, because they just seem to adapt really well into Minecraft, even the simple things. But I digress, this isn't done yet. I intentionally built this without adding the texturing and variation. It's an important step where I mix in different materials to break up the uniform texture of the same blocks grouped together. Not only does it add more detail to the build, but it also gives it more character. So now compare the original to the new and improved textured version. I think this step goes a long way in taking my builds to the next level. The way I like to think about it is the base version is concerned with making it look good at a distance, while the textured version is concerned with making it look good up close. The other thing that's really nice is if I ever want to build another one down the road, I can just copy paste the original over and do the texturing from scratch again, creating another unique building. But anyways, how about we head on back to the Let's Play world and get this thing built. Hey, so it's a little dark in here. I haven't mob-proofed or lit anything up yet, but I have set up the basic interior. The front window is right here, and the 2 back windows are down here. Everything in the middle is a kind of random assortment of walls and platforms that makes, I think, a pretty interesting layout. But the reason why I haven't done the complete interior yet is because I want to first show how I'll be hiding the hidden staircase, and it'll be easier with less clutter, so I'm gonna go ahead and build it real quick, and I'll be back. All right, and here she is in all of her beautiful glory. And the doorway is gonna be in that notch in the wall right there, with the staircase popping out of the ground below. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. The upper doorway is actually an addition I made so that there could be more headroom as you go down the stairs. Again, I've got to be able to take a donkey down this thing. And the redstone was actually super simple. All I had to do was add a piston next to this redstone dust. The piston 1-ticks to the observer, which sends a pulse to extend the door, mirrored on both sides. Again, huge shout out to Ira for the awesome design. It was pretty simple to build, and I love how fast it is. Speed was a big importance to me because, again, I'm gonna be traveling speedily on a donkey, and I'll want it to open promptly. But anyways, how about I get the rest of the interior built now? And here we are. Things feel a lot more complete now that I've got the floor and the details in place. The basic idea here is it's supposed to be, well, a barn. It's got all sorts of miscellaneous supplies stored away on shelves and up in the rafters, and on the left there are a few little horse stables. The design for the layout was inspired heavily by the interior of the exact same barn from WoW, and though I of course took my creative liberties, I still think I got it pretty close. My favorite part of this whole thing is the lighting effect with the ceiling. There are only a handful of light sources down below, while the upper level is completely dark. The effect makes the barn feel dimly lit, and it feels really awesome. It also maintains parity with the dimly lit windows. And speaking of the windows, I didn't want the sandstone showing, so I covered it up with a painting. It's a little goofy, but I think it's a fun addition. I also made sure everything was mob-proofed. A lot of time went into making sure this place is 100% safe. But enough of that, let's figure out what the rest of this farmstead is going to look like. I mentioned earlier that I'd also like to add in the other elements of the farm. There's the 3 windmills, a burned down home, the silo, and of course, the large farmland plot in front. The silo was the simplest thing to start with since it's identical to the one that's attached to the other barn in Moonbrook. So all I had to do was copy paste over the version I'd already built, and that's one thing already knocked out. Next up, I'll address the windmills, and designing one of these bad boys turned out to be rather tricky since it's kind of difficult to make a small scale tripod in a voxel game. You can see here, I was messing around with a skewed layout for the legs, but due to the awkwardness of how the supports were connecting, I ultimately decided to scrap the design and go for this instead, which isn't quite as symmetrical, but it made for a better design overall. Everything else came together pretty quickly, and here is the final base design that I then detailed 3 separate times into the versions that I'll be building in my world. Not too shabby. Moving on to the burned down home, and this one is an interesting little cupcake. You see, the home that this once was is the same as the starter shack design that I built in Moonbrook. But there's a problem. You see, this was the first thing I designed when I started the Westfall project, and to put it bluntly, I was sloppy. The floor plan is completely off. It's rectangular when it should be square, and the whole shape of the building is thus very incorrect. So in the interest of doing things right this time, I went ahead and remade my original design into a proportionally accurate version, and man, I gotta say that I wish I'd done this from the beginning. It would have been really nice to have all this extra space in my starter shack, but hey, that's neither here nor there. With the correct model in hand, all I had to do was deconstruct the building and turn it into the burned and broken version that'll be a part of my farmstead. I admittedly was a little unsure about this step because I wasn't certain that I'd be able to get it to look quite right, but it turns out that polished basalt is an absolute S-tier burned wood block. I also mixed in some Blackstone and acacia, and even some dead coral blocks as well. Overall, I'm really pleased with how this turned out, and that's what I love about this game. Sometimes I go into a project not knowing if things are really gonna work out, only to surprise myself and do it better than I could have imagined. Which brings me to the last piece of the puzzle, the farmland plot. And this thing poses an interesting challenge because while I might have normally made a 90-degree plot, this one sits at a skewed angle, which will prove to be more difficult to make in Minecraft. Luckily, I'm like really good at this game, so no. After a bit of tinkering, I was able to come up with a shape that felt correct. Then it just took a few hours to meticulously recreate the wheat patterns diagonally to match what it looks like in WoW. I certainly could have just winged it, and it probably would have turned out just fine, but I feel like there's something special about doing it this way. But I wasn't done yet because I then sprinkled in dirt and coarse dirt around the crops to create some noise and break up all the negative space in the farmland, which helped, but I still felt that it needed some more, and that's when I had the idea to add lines across the soil. I put together an array of parallel strips that I then imprinted atop the farmland, again using dirt and coarse dirt. This makes it look like there's till lines across the area, which was a great extra detail that got rid of the negative space a little too well. So finally, I broke up a bunch of the lines and mixed some blocks around to produce this final version here. And again, this is one of of those situations where I really surprised myself. This thing turned out better than I was expecting. So now that I've got all the components lined up and ready to go, it's now time to think about the big picture and determine how I want to lay this all out in the Let's Play world. What I've got here is a screenshot of my current save file. You can see down there's my donkey ranch, that's Moonbrook. Over here is my incomplete main base. Don't worry about that. And right here is the barn I just built. So first I want to think about roads. I'd like to build one that connects from my base all the way over to my honey farm, basically like a highway that goes straight through Westfall. But for this project, I'm only concerned with the section from here to about this point over here maybe. Then obviously I'll want to connect it to the barn, and I'm thinking I can just send it right through and link up with Moonbrook, so this will be the path that I take when traveling on my donkey. Now onto the structures. First, I think the farmland will fit perfectly right in front of the barn here. The silo should of course sit right next to the barn, and that just leaves the windmills and burned home. There's a hill already here, and windmills of course need to sit up high to catch the wind, so I'm thinking I'll put the three of them somewhere over here, and the home can sit right about here. Finally, there's the matter of determining the biome line where I'll extend all of the terrain, and I'm seeing a nice natural boundary that extends from here all the way along the riverside, then comes back down over to about here. So everything in this space will need to be terraformed. Okay, so I've gone ahead and prettied it up a bit, and I'm fairly confident with the layout at this point. I was a little worried about the ice road in the middle, but I think that by extending the terrain way past it, it'll balance things out. Anyways, now it's time to do all this. I've gone ahead and roughly pasted in the schematics for everything, and you can start to see the vision. I'll probably end up moving things around as I terraform, but this is a solid rough draft. The biggest thing I'm unsure about is the farmland. My design is completely flat, but all the surrounding terrain is going to be a bunch of rolling hills, and I'm worried that the transition to a flat farm area is going to look too abrupt. But I'm not too sure that it would look very good to slope it either. Well, as I pondered that issue, I went ahead and laid out a rough plot where I'd like my main road to sit. And I essentially ran it along the natural ridgeline I've got over there. I really like how it bobs up and down through the hills. It should look pretty sick when it's done. And now that I have a little bit of perspective up here, I'm thinking that I might actually be able to slope the farmland after all. I'm gonna remove this hill in the middle and see if I can't create a rough draft of the terrain to get a better idea of if this is gonna work or not. Haha, okay, I think this'll work. It's only gonna be sloped by a couple elevations, but I think even that will feel a lot more appropriate with the rolling hills. I'm thinking that when I build it, I'll just raise and lower the schematic and build what I need to for each level. Again, there's a degree of uncertainty here. I don't know if this will look right, but there's a point with this type of thing where you just gotta send it. So to review, I'll be building the farmland in the middle, the windmills, the home, and the silo, and I'll be laying down the road network, and I'll be terraforming the entire surrounding area. That's gonna involve adding and subtracting the existing terrain by hand to create gentle rolling hills and topping it all with pathway blocks to give it its signature Westfall look. So ladies and gentlemen,
he's gonna do a big time lapse, he's gonna do a big time lapse.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Well, 40 hours of work later, and bang! We got a farmstead. It's funny though, because as I'm sure you noticed in the time lapse, the farmland and other buildings only took a fraction of the time it took me to do the terraforming and all the other work. And that's because, besides the fact that it just took up a large area, all of this terrain design was done by hand. That means I was constantly making up hills and curves on the fly and trying to do so in a way which utilized the existing terrain so I didn't have to completely change everything, all the while trying to manage my dwindling supply of resources. It's really weird to say this, but I'm almost completely out of dirt on my world. Completely. And so there are sections of the terrain that have these large cavities underneath them, which allowed me to save on resources instead of exhausting my already fleeting supply. Because besides those cavities, the rest of the terraforming was completely filled in solid, and the reason I did it that way was simply because it's faster. Once again, my rapid click macro shows its usefulness. By just looking down and spamming right click, it allows me to quickly fill in areas with dirt. And this ends up being a lot faster than the alternative method, which would be to just slowly crouch around and build up a hill in the air. On top of that, if I ever want to change the work that I've done, it'll be just as slow to fix it. Whereas if the whole thing was just completely solid, it's trivial to dig out and make whatever changes I need. All of this being said though, it certainly would have been faster to just pre-design all the terrain in Creative and build off of a schematic. And believe me, I love using schematics. But in this case, number one, I just really like doing it by hand, and number two, I think there's a special authenticity that'd be lost if I designed it in Creative. One of the things that's really cool is since I've done all these hills by hand, I'm starting to notice my style change and my skill improving. Like, compare the hills over here on the left to the new ones I've just made. They're deeper, wavier, and overall just more intricate. In a way, you can think of Westfall like my sketchbook. With each page, it gets a little bit better, and the overall area tells a story of my progression. But enough of that. The biggest thing I was worried about, as you know, was the farmland, and I'm pleased to say that I think it went successfully. Not only do I feel like it works better with the terrain like I was hoping for, it also just makes the farmland look a little bit more interesting overall. And everything else fell into place pretty nicely. I think the windmills sit at a perfect height up on the hill over there, and over here you'll see a shack that you won't recognize. That's because I designed it as a quick afterthought, and besides the fact that it was supposed to accompany the silo anyways, I also made it to fulfill a specific purpose. Up to this point, I've been using this ghetto temporary setup to store my items, and that's a big no-no for me. I'm a much bigger fan of building a permanent storage/work hub during these projects, and though it's a bit late, I figured one of these babies would fit the bill nicely. So I've equipped it with some chests and a hidden ender chest. Now I can thankfully clear out all this junk. Okay, I've gone ahead and thrown everything in here and gotten things decently organized. Pretty cool. And I love making permanent workstations like this because it really doesn't take much to build, and it feels so much nicer than something like the haphazard setup I was using before. But anyways, my attention turns back to the roads, which are looking nice, but they require one final step of detail. Currently, they've got a perfect edge, which was important at first to get the shape just right, but now it kind of just looks unnatural. So by mixing some blocks around, I can essentially add noise to the roads, which makes them look worn out and just more interesting. The biggest thing about this process is I don't want to muddle the shape too much, so I'm only changing a few blocks at a time, and I'm constantly checking my work to make sure I didn't change it too much. One of the strategies that I find works best is I'll remove a corner piece, put it a block over, and then put grass in its place. It's a perfect bit of variation that doesn't alter the shape too much. I also find that occasionally throwing in a random piece over here and removing a piece in the middle helps a ton as well. On top of that, I'm also adding in cobblestone slabs for steps and hidden lighting underneath light gray carpets to make sure it's all mob-proofed and safe. And that's the name of the game, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish all that up and see you guys in just a minute. All right, all done, looking really great, except for the dirt road over at the barn. That still needs to be done, but I held off on doing that because it's a microcosm of a bigger list of things I gotta do around the farm. You see, similar to the texturing step that I did on the barn, this whole farmstead is in dire need of some additional details and enhancements to really take it to the next level. And there are all sorts of great ideas that I can pull from the game. Scarecrows, wagons, fencing, etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new and improved detailed farmstead. I've spent a bunch of time packing in a ton of cool details around here, and I'm not gonna cover everything, but I'll rapid fire off the big ones. Carts and wheelbarrows sprinkled around the area. The carts have varying stages of decay. Miscellaneous crates and supplies piled around the barn. A finished pathway that connects with the silo and the farmland, and on the other side, the pathway continues, connecting with the burned down home. Fencing around the farmland to make it feel more enclosed. A second shack next to the windmills. A well and outhouse next to the burned down home. A broken down plow at the center of the farmland. Piles of burned wood to pair with the burned down home. 2 scarecrows with different colors of leather armor, and 3 iron golems sprinkled around the farmland and anchored into the ground using leads. I added these guys because in WoW, the area is overrun with mobs called energized harvest reapers. And as a little hat tip, I thought it'd be cool to represent that with iron golems. I even name tagged them. The leads just connect to a fence post underground. I didn't want them to go anywhere, of course, but I was hoping that this might allow them to roam around a little bit. Unfortunately, they don't seem to move from the location that I spawned them in. Still cool though. Again, all of these details were added based on stuff from World of Warcraft, and I could easily rapid fire off a bunch of comparison shots, but I think you get the idea. I will show you this though. The texturing I did at the bottom of my buildings reflects the border around them in game. And I think that this is an important detail because it makes the buildings feel more embedded into the ground. The smaller the footprint of the buildings are, the less there is, sort of suggesting that the bigger the construction, the more of a mess was made. But the obvious exception to this rule is the burned down home. I was really skeptical about this part, mainly because I wasn't sure if the whole scorched land look was going to come across very well, and admittedly it did take some trial and error to finally get there, but at the end of the day, I'm really proud of the final product. I used Blackstone and basalt like before, but I also added in blocks of coal, which I think really helps. There are also piles of burned wood on the outside, just like over in the farmland. Which reminds me, in case you didn't know, you can bury campfires underneath a block and their smoke will transmit through that block. But most importantly, everything has been carefully mob-proofed, which actually proved to be rather tricky in this case since the upper areas couldn't necessarily be lit up. And this of course applies to the whole farmstead as well. Every single block around here has been accounted for and there is zero chance that any mobs will spawn anywhere. A great way to visualize this, by the way, is to check it out at night, because as the sun goes down, all of the hidden lighting in the area reveals itself and makes the farm pop in the darkness. And as for the areas that aren't lit up, it just means I was able to do so without the use of lighting, using things like slabs and buttons. But anyways, I think it's time to move on again. Believe me, I'd love to linger around here and show you more details though. Like for example, over here, I adjusted the elevation of each foundation so it would contour with the topography and feel more realistic. Okay, I snuck one more in there, but now I really need to move on. If you've watched the previous episode where I built Moonbrook, then you'll have noticed a lot of similarities with how I've approached the development for my farm. And that now begs the question, what component of Moonbrook is missing over at my farmstead? What component? It's the trees. Trees, oh wonderful trees. It's really amazing how a few here and there around the area work wonders to make this whole thing feel complete. I've added 27 of the same custom trees that I've been using this whole time. If you'd like to learn more about those, I designed them in my Donkey Ranch episode, and I also went ahead and added in the base texturing at the bottom of each tree. Similar to how the texturing at the base of my buildings makes things feel more complete, a cluster of dirt and fallen leaves really enhances the placement of my trees. Just check out how they'd look if I took away that detail and left the trees on their own. Not quite as good, is it? It's also just a good excuse to sprinkle in some foliage, which is another detail I've been taking the time to add around the area as well. Okay, just a few last minute details. First, I added a couple of hay bundles sprinkled around the farm. It's only natural, of course, it's a wheat farm. There are 3 next to my cart over here, and 2 next to my cart on the other side over here. I also turned all my beacons in the area into quad beacons with speed, strength, resistance, and regeneration. And I changed the color of the beams and covered them with carpets, same as I did over at Moonbrook. And finally, I've been waiting to the very end to mention my wayfinding sign at the intersection here. It's an armor stand sitting inside 2 stacked signs, and each direction has a different named location. This way takes you to Moonbrook. This way takes you to my main base. This way takes you to my honey farm at the other side of Westfall. And this way takes you to Blackstone Farmstead. I figured that since the whole point of this farm is to conceal my hidden passageway that's made of Blackstone, the name Blackstone Farmstead fits perfectly. And now that it's named and christened, I'm officially calling this a finished project. Which means it's now finally time to get ready to trade my stone reserves away and bring this whole project to a close. And the first thing that I'd like to do is fly on over to my donkey ranch so that I can tell you guys a little story. Back in September, I made a short showcasing an exploit I learned about where you could throw speed potions on donkeys and they'd breed at a higher speed value. But long story short, it turns out this trick doesn't actually work, and I just got extremely lucky when I was testing it out for the video. Here's the guy that I'd gotten, 12.945, absolutely insane. For reference, after I posted that short, I didn't get a single donkey with a speed even close to 12.7 for at least a few hours. And that's when I started to realize I might have messed up. After doing some research, it became clear to me that this was a bug from Bedrock Edition and has since been patched as of 1.19.6. It was never something that was possible in Java. Besides the fact that I was just really bummed about this because it's a cool trick, I also just felt really bad that I peddled a bunch of misinformation. So to rectify that, I went ahead and ran an organized experiment to prove that this trick didn't actually work for me in Java. I did this by breeding 3 different groups of horses 50 times each. One group had no potion effect, one group had speed 2, and the other group had the 90% version of Potion of the Turtle Master. And the results were pretty clear. The spread from each group was all fairly close together, and ironically, the highest average speed came from the Turtle Master group. Needless to say, the trick did not work. If you'd like to learn more about this experiment, I made a whole channel about it on my Discord server under the name Donkey Info. In the future, I'll be better about verifying these things before I make a video about it. Man, what a way to make a donkey of myself. Anyways, despite this trick not working, I still had a goal to reach a 13 meters per second donkey, and my 12.9 guy showed me that I was really close. It took a lot of on and off grinding, but finally, during a random session on stream, I was able to get this. Is it this guy? Oh! There's no shot. That's right, I was able to get this absolute stallion here at 13.273 meters per second. I had done it. Now over here, I've got Zoomer, my original fastest donkey that I showed off last episode, but unfortunately, he's no longer the top dog, and I'm afraid he's gonna have to go. So I'm just gonna go ahead and throw him in here. Never mind what this all does, it's not important. And I'm gonna head back over to my new champion and christen him with the same name, Zoomer. There can only be one. By the way, the mod that I used to check out the horse's stats is called Horse Debug Info, link down below. Anyways, now that I've got Zoomer 2.0 here, I'd like to take him on a spin and test out everything that I've done today. Okay, so I'll start here by the storage silo, and the first thing I've got to do is travel out of Moonbrook. So I'll make my way across town and then up to the outpost hill. Once I'm up here, I can get a great view of Blackstone Farmstead in the distance, and now I get to take the pathway down over to there. I'll cross through the intersection and enter the lovely farm, maybe admire a few details, you know, and then promptly enter the secret passageway, which automatically opens up for me, and the way is made. Now I get to take the, honestly, rather long journey down, and as soon as I make it to the bottom, I will have made it to the bedrock project. And from here, it's just a matter of making my way over to my chests. Here we are. So it's at this point that I'd tie off Zoomer, load up all my shulker boxes with stone, and then make the same journey back to Moonbrook and drop it all off. Now, this is all well and good, but there are a few things I'd like to do to enhance this journey, and the first thing is right here. Though the secret door opens up just fine from the outside, I'd like it to close once I've gone through, and then of course open up again on my way back up. The way I made this happen was by adding another tripwire, except I put it a ways down the staircase. This way, as I'm flying up on Zoomer, it'll trip, and there should be enough time for the door to open. That way we can just continuously ride up without stopping. All I had to do was connect an instant redstone line all the way over to the same line that the other tripwire is connected to, so now either input will open or close the door. Easy. And for reference, the distance I set between the tripwire and the door was 60 blocks. From what I've tested, that should be enough to account for my juiced donkey. Which brings me to the second thing I'd like to do, because though I'm extremely satisfied with this guy's speed, it'd be foolish of me not to use speed potions on top of that. So what I'm thinking I'd like to do is set up potion stations at each end of the route. And tentatively, I'm thinking one will go somewhere at the bottom of the staircase, and the other one will go somewhere around my barn in Moonbrook. I ended up landing on an automatic potion brewer design by Rex Stone. This design is fantastic because it's cheap, compact, and will constantly keep a full container of potions at any given time. I wanted a setup like this because I can just load it up with brewing materials, and everything, including the water bottles, will automatically be taken care of. So I've gone ahead and built one of those bad boys behind the wall here and connected it to this simple little station setup. There's a dispenser behind this block, and so all I have to do is ride into the pressure plates with Zoomer, and he'll get dosed with a speed 2 potion, upon which we can quickly, be on our way. Here's a little behind the scenes. This is the bulk brewing setup, and it's connected to the dispenser, so at any given time, I'll have a barrel plus a hopper and dispenser's worth of potions, and whenever one gets used, the system will make sure it gets topped off. Just for redundancy, I went ahead and maxed out each ingredient dropper at the top. So in theory, at 3 potions per ingredient set, I should be able to get 1728 potions out of this thing before I need to restock. That's a stack of shulker boxes of potions. Again, I said for redundancy. Needless to say that this thing is all ready to go for me. Now I've just got to head over to Moonbrook and build another one there. Except this time it was much more tricky because I decided that I wanted to shoot the potion from under the ground by pressing this button. That meant that underneath here I had to move some redstone around to fit the potion brewer, but the real kicker is the fact that the output chest is all the way down there, and I somehow needed to get it all the way up to the dispenser below the floor. And I'm quite proud of the solution here. A dropper shoots the potions into a bubble column that feeds into another dropper underneath the dispenser. And because of quasi-connectivity, when the dropper is powered, it also powers the dispenser above. So when I press the button, it'll power the dropper and thus the dispenser, and that same signal will also go down to the other dispenser to replenish the one that just got used. At any given time, there will be 6 potions in the dropper as a buffer and 1 in the dispenser ready to go. And just like last time, I maxed out all of my ingredients, so I'll probably never have to worry about refilling them again. Okay, what's next? Well, while I'm at the storage silo here, there is an issue I've been meaning to address for a while now. All the way back in the first Westfall episode where I built this thing, I had run into a bottleneck where the shulker unloader worked so fast that it quickly overloaded the hoppers, leading to a bunch of items cycling around the system with no place to go, and that leads to the items despawning. So to combat this issue, I put in this circuit down here that sends 1 shulker a minute to control how many items the unloader is spitting out at a time. It was a band-aid solution, but it worked. The only problem was it meant that if I wanted to put 56 shulkers into the system, I would need to wait 56 minutes for it to finish. And that's kinda dookie. At the time, I was okay with it, but now I've got an idea that should help out a lot because it occurred to me that I've got a whole extra side of double chest that could also be covered with hoppers, and in theory, I could run a second water stream on top of it. This would effectively double my loading speed since I'll have double the amount of hoppers. And that would mean I could set the speed to 1 box every 30 seconds, which means a full double chest would only take about 28 minutes to unload, not a whole hour. But this is all, of course, under the assumption that I can build a second water stream in here. Things are tight, and I don't really want to make any major changes to the exterior or interior, so I'll have to be careful. On top of that, actually connecting the 2 water streams from the unloader into the system looks like it's going to be a tight squeeze. Luckily, it appears that the actual splitting process will be easy since the unloader already shoots the items into 2 different water streams equally, so instead of combining them like it is right now, I'll just keep them separate. Phew, okay, it was close, but I got it done. The original water stream is still in the same place, and I went ahead and built the second one on top. This was the only way I could keep the water streams separate while also fitting them both inside the barn. Consequently, it meant that I had to add an extra row of hoppers and droppers on each side, but hey, that's just some additional storage, right? I also think I did a pretty decent job of making everything look nice. In fact, I think I actually liked this design a little bit better than before. But as you know, the other difficulty was actually connecting this up, and like I said, all I had to do was keep the 2 water streams separate, except it was really hard to send them up to the top without messing with this water stream in the middle, which is the return line for empty shulkers. Ultimately, I was able to barely squeeze it in here. I had to mess with the redstone for the unloader a bit and overlap a couple of things. I'll spare you the details, but the point is, I did it. I even ran a couple of tests to make sure all the items were moving correctly, and it's a miracle. I actually was able to fix something and have it work exactly the way I'd intended. But enough of this victory lap, there's still one last thing that I need to do, and that's gather and consolidate every single shulker box around my world. If you remember, I've got a few stored away in my underground area below my donkey ranch here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and make my way over to this secret passageway. Haha, nice. And there are a few shulkers in this machine here that I need to pull out. For those of you who don't know, I've got a sugarcane farm down here, and this station is designed so that I can take the sugarcane out of storage, throw it into a shulker box, and when it's full, send it off to the other end of my ranch where I'll redispense the box and convert the sugarcane into sugar that I'll use to tame my donkeys. Anyways, I had enough foresight when I designed this thing to add a shulker ejection system so that when the time finally came to trade my stone reserves away, I'd be able to easily pull all my shulkers out of the system. Well, guess what? It's now time, and because of all my hard work, all I have to do is flip this lever and the system will cycle through all the stored shulker boxes and send them over to a barrel at the front of the interface. And look at that, here they come trickling on in. I think that's everything, 9 boxes. Fine with me, I'm gonna need every shulker I can get my hands on. Which brings me over here to my Dragon Forge because I just remembered that there should be 2 additional shulker boxes stored in here. Haha, secret passageway for the win. And now I've just got to make my way down into the bowels of the redstone. Okay, so all the way at the bottom here, I've got my loading station, and on each side there's a shulker box ready to go as a buffer. It won't hurt anything to take them, I'll just need to remember to put them back before I run this thing again. Oop. Aha, okay, there we go. Cool. It's funny, the easiest way out of here is just to fly out to the surface. Ha 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 ha. I really need to cover these up. Anyways, that finally brings me to, of all places, my main storage room. Because this is where I've been carefully safeguarding all my other hard-earned shulkers. And with the 11 that I just gathered, plus this guy right here, I think I should have everything. Hey, hi, remember just a minute ago when I grabbed all those extra shulker boxes? Well, I really should have counted out how many I needed first because I just did that now. I've got 15 here for the donkey, 21 in my ender chest, with the other 6 being essential boxes that I'd like to keep on hand, and 32 slots open in my inventory. Do you want to know how many that leaves me with? Go on, ask me. It's 12. It's the exact number of boxes that I just gathered. Ugh, you can't make this stuff up. Well, regardless, I can finally throw a chest on Zoomer here, get him saddled with his 15 shulkers, and with the others for my inventory and in my ender chest, I'm sitting at 68 total shulkers that I'll be transporting back and forth from here to Moonbrook to move all my stone. This is a very weird, surreal moment for me because it's the culmination of almost a year of work. I started the Westfall project around Christmas of 2023, and here we are around Christmas of 2024, finally ready to get this thing done. I originally theorized that I'd get around 26,000 emeralds out of all 150 double chests I've got down at the Bedrock project. But remember, I've also got 3 other stashes that I'd like to remove, so I further theorized that I could get as much as 78,000 emeralds total. If that's anywhere near true, that means by the time I'm done, I'll have almost 2 full double chests of emerald blocks. I'm really excited to get started, but equally as nervous because there are so many unknowns, like whether or not the storage silo is gonna hold up, or if there's gonna be any issues with the villagers, and probably a bunch of other things I hadn't even considered. But like I've said before, there's a certain point to these things where you just gotta send it. And on December 14th, 2024, that's exactly what I did. On twitch.tv/coolingmystery, I traded away my stone reserves in front of a live audience for 12 hours straight. I journeyed back and forth from the Bedrock project to Moonbrook, depositing my shulkers into the storage silo and rapidly trading with my obedient Mason villagers. There were a couple of issues that did come up, and I'll talk about them more in a minute, but all things considered, everything went extremely well, and we all had a really fun stream. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, by the way, that throughout the stream, I consumed a total of 10 different flavors of Red Bull and ranked them based on flavor. Don't worry, I only drank about half of each can, which is still about 400 milligrams of caffeine, but that's not important. I also siphoned off a bit from each can and created a Frankenstein's monster glass of jungle juice, which tasted so good. Like, it smells like gym class. This is the final tier list, by the way. You'll find it on my Discord along with a link to the tier list if you'd like to make your own ranking. But I digress. In terms of the actual subject matter, I'd start by cutting down the double chests to create a massive pile of stone that I could then easily shift-click into my shulker boxes. Then once I'd filled all 68 of them, I'd saddle up on Zoomer and make my way over to Moonbrook. And by the way, it turns out that Zoomer would move so fast with a speed 2 potion that he'd literally glitch out when going up the hills, which was kind of a bummer since it wasn't a very smooth ride, but I'm choosing to look at that as a sign of success. Anyways, the next thing I'd do is drop off my shulkers at the silo, and despite my best efforts, I learned that if I put in all the shulkers at once, the system would eventually overflow. Luckily, I caught on to this fairly early into the stream, and I don't think any stone was lost, but it still wasn't good, and my solution was just to split my inputs in half, meaning I'd put in half my shulkers when I first arrived, go trade for a day or two, then come back after the system had settled and put in the other half. I found myself constantly checking the water streams afterwards just to be sure, and I can say fairly confidently that from that point on, I had no issues and, in theory, never lost a single piece of stone. The other issue I discovered with the silo had to do with the speed controller in the trading hall. It's a plain and simple flaw with how the system is designed, and frankly not worth getting into right now, but TLDR, it was just finicky, and I found myself constantly adjusting it because the speed was either too slow or so fast that I couldn't keep up and my inventory would overflow. When I did find a good sweet spot, however, man oh man was that satisfying. It never seemed to get old watching my inventory quickly fill up with emeralds and chasing around rivers of hidden XP. Eventually, I'd finally wise up and learn to use F3+B, which shows entity hitboxes and allowed me to more easily locate the deposits of XP, which seemed to follow me around and build up along the end of each row. And I know this is gonna sound like a small thing, but I learned that zigzagging up and down as I traded was the most efficient route to take because it meant that I didn't have to move around as much, which makes a difference when you're doing it for 12 hours straight. Either way, when I'd finally done enough trading and all my shulkers had been unloaded at the silo, I'd once again saddle up, dose Zoomer with a speed potion, and make my way back to do it all over again. By By the 6-hour mark, I had already removed all 200 double chests down at the Bedrock project. But then, in a surprising twist, it took me all the way to the 11-hour mark to remove everything sitting outside my kelp farm. That just goes to show you how much was sitting out there. And around this time, I also started to catch on to something weird that was happening. Some, but not most, of my villagers began to get permanently trade locked. I had no idea why this was happening, and nothing I was doing seemed to fix the issue, which was really concerning. As a last-minute random Hail Mary, I created a backup of my world and updated it to 1.21 just to see if anything changed, and sure enough, they did in fact fix themselves, so I can only guess that this is some sort of bug in 1.16 that has since been addressed. Either way, because it was only happening with a few of them, I decided to just press on, and when I actually update my world in the future, the issue will take care of itself. Which brings me to the 12-hour mark, where I began chipping away at the chests outside of my Dragon Forge, but as soon as I got them loaded up, I finally decided to throw in the towel and finish the stream at 12 hours and 37 minutes. I had been hoping to get it all done in one sitting, and the large amounts of caffeine in my system had definitely gotten me further than I was expecting, but ultimately, I decided to save the rest for the next stream, which, a day later, only took me another 4 hours to complete. I transported over the majority of my bulk reserves and spent a shockingly long amount of time draining my storage silo down to 0. At first, it was running at full speed, then half speed, then pretty soon it was just a trickle, upon which I manually removed the last remaining stacks of stone and traded them away the same as I'd done thousands of times before. Just like that, I was done. Which brings us finally back to the present here, and I thought the perfect place to be was down here at the now stone chest free Bedrock project, where I'd like to give you guys some stats. Throughout that entire trading process, I traded with villagers 74,494 times. I went from level 53 to 282 for a total of 327,928 experience orbs. I also rode on a donkey for a total of 26.4 kilometers and made 10 full trips from my base to Moonbrook, transporting a total of 680 shulker boxes, amounting to nearly 1.2 million stone. But that's not even the full number, because remember, there was also a bunch of stone sitting in the storage silo before I'd even started, and I think the easiest way to figure this all out is just to count my emeralds. Since the stone trade is the same for every villager, all I'll have to do is just multiply that by the total number of emeralds to get the total amount of stone that I traded away. And oh, you can already see it, can't ya? I never had a use for this building when I made it last episode, but lo and behold, I was ultimately able to give it one. And I am just absolutely rich in here with emerald blocks and other goodies. And yes, your eyes aren't deceiving you. These are in fact zombie heads, but I've turned them around so you can't see the faces, and I think they make for some decent makeshift emerald blocks. But I'm beating around the bush, aren't I? In these chests is a large amount of emeralds. I bet you're just dying to find out how much I've gotten there, aren't you? Well, don't worry, I've got you. I'll reveal the contents of these chests. I've just got to take care of a few things first. Like seriously, I've been really meaning to reorganize things in here. This can't wait. And it's been far too long since I've done a harvest at my underground wheat farm. Maybe I shouldn't have done it all at once. Oh, and despite getting all this XP, I still hadn't bothered to repair all my tools. I mean, this one shovel, so you best bet that I'm gonna get that one done too. Okay, all right. Where was I? Oh yeah, wither skeletons. After all, I have a very ravenous hunger for beacons. I've been spamming them all around Westfall, and the only way that I'm gonna keep up is by continuing to grind at my farm here. Okay, I'm fairly certain now that I've got everything done. Let me just check my list real quick. Yep, looks good to me. So where was I? Ah, yes, right, the emeralds. Nice. Oh baby. 2.5 double chests of emerald blocks. The exact number comes out to 8,803 emerald blocks, which when converted down into emeralds gives us a whopping 79,227 emeralds. Shockingly close to my year-old estimate of 78,000. So let's figure this out. If I look at one of the villagers, you'll see that the trade is 20 stone per emerald, which is the standard deal for these guys. However, it's not the deal that I was trading at. This is because villagers will actually give you a limited time discount if you trade enough with them, and essentially the entire time I was trading my stone away, I was trading at 19 stone per emerald. So if we take the 79,000 emeralds I've gotten and multiply that by 19, we'll get a grand total of 1.5 million stone that I traded away. And if I look at my statistics, I've mined about 2.1 million stone, and almost 400k of that has been placed back down, which means that after essentially deleting 1.5 million, I'm left with about 200,000 stone on my world. But I think the real number is much lower than that. Back at base here, I've got about 4 double chests worth in one of my bulk storage units, and then about another 4 double chests over here at my turbo bulk storage, which I've gone ahead and reorganized after I moved most of the stone out of here. And I certainly have more scattered around my world in various chests, but I doubt that that would add up past like 10 double chests worth, maybe. So all of that's to say that I'm probably sitting at only around 60k stone right now, which is kind of funny because I'd almost say that I went a little too far, and now stones all of a sudden become a bit of a precious resource for me. Really weird to say that, but either way, I think I did my job. And that now brings me over to here in front of my starter shack, because this was the first thing that I built to start the Westfall project. And so it's only fitting that this is where the journey will also come to an end. It's funny looking back on that first episode because I had no idea that this project would grow to the magnitude that it did. I originally wanted Westfall to just be one episode, then I decided it was going to be a 2-parter, then it turned into a 4-parter, and now we're here with part 5. And the funny thing is, though this is the finale, it's not really the end. There are still a ton of things that I'd like to build from Westfall, and I've got a lot of fun ideas on how I want to implement them in the Let's Play world. After all, I've been saying that I ultimately want this area to stretch out far into the distance and really become a gigantic droughted plains biome. And when you think about it like that, you can really start to see that there's still a ton of expanding to be done. So for now, this is goodbye to the Westfall project. But I will be returning to it in the future after I've completed some of the other projects that have been patiently waiting in line. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, I can return back to the Bedrock project, the very thing that I was trying to work on a year ago when I got swept into this whole crazy tangent. And all of this, by the way, was certainly unnecessary. I could have easily just moved my stone chests and saved myself a year of work. But I did all this simply because it sounded fun, and I appreciate all of you supporting me throughout the journey. A huge shout out to all the people who have tuned into my streams on Twitch, especially my top viewers of 2024. You've all been wonderful company, and I can't wait to have more fun the next time I'm live. If you're interested in tuning in, my current schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 12 p.m. PST, and at this point, I'm essentially streaming all of my progress for the Let's Play. But other than that, if you've made it this far and you haven't liked and subscribed already, then I'm assuming it's just late and you fell asleep, in which case I know you'll do the right thing in the morning. Thank you all for watching, and now, if you'll excuse me, it's time to get to work on the Bedrock project. Right?